Hi everyone, I'm David Hamilton. I'm taking over the Psychologies page for a wee while just to tell you all about the mind-body connection. First of all, thanks to Psychologies for giving me the chance to do this. I'm doing a series of talks, the first one next week actually in conjunction with Psychologies on how the mind heals the body. So it's next Tuesday, in conjunction with Psychologies and Funzing, which is a speaking platform. They do London talks at night. So anyway, enough of that. What's some goodies for you? So to give you a wee bit of background for those of you who are not familiar with what I do, so I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry. I was what you call an organic chemist. Now, organic chemist, that's nothing whatsoever to do with organic foods. Sorry, I was just checking that I was definitely on live. It's strange when you do these Facebook lives and then you suddenly realise, am I actually live? Or have I forgot to press the button? So anyway, so I used to be what you call an organic chemist. That's what I did in the pharmaceutical industry. And it's nothing to do with organic food. It's like, you know the way a child plays with Lego bricks? So a child takes a bunch of Lego bricks and sticks them all together to make a shape. So an organic chemist does exactly the same thing, but instead of making shapes out of Lego bricks, we take a bunch of atoms and we make shapes. And what the shapes become is the drugs that you get prescribed by the doctor. So that's what I did. But amazingly, what really interested me much more than that was the placebo effect. You know, what happens when you test the drugs on people? So to give you an example, it wasn't uncommon in drug testing to, let's say, 100 people get a drug, and to prove that the drug works, you've also got to give 100 people a fake drug, the placebo, the sugar pill. So out of the 100 who gets the drug, let's say you get 70 people improving. It's not uncommon for those who out the group who got the sugar pill, the placebo, for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, sometimes even more than that, improving on the placebo because they think they're getting the drug. And that kind of thing, when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, that kind of thing blew me away. And I started researching all the different aspects of the mind-body connection. In fact, I'll bet you yourself have experienced a placebo effect and you just didn't realise. If you go into any supermarket, you can buy, paracetamol or aspirin for like 20 pence, something like that. Or you can buy a more expensive version, so paracetamol, expensive version, Panadol. And what you find is a more expensive version works better than the cheaper version, mostly because it's more expensive. There was a really cool study done a few years ago on aspirin. And scientists took like several hundred people who had recurring headaches and they split them into 4 groups. So one group got an expensive looking aspirin, so an aspirin that was packaged very expensively, made to look really fancy. Maybe what you would get if you bought Panadol in the supermarket. A second group got a cheaper version, so that the mass market version of paracetamol, for example. And then a third group, they got a placebo, but the placebo was made to look really expensive, so it was in fancy packaging, and it was looked expensive. And then a fourth group got a cheap looking placebo. Now here's the thing, the group who got the expensive placebo, that worked best. Sorry, the group who got the expensive drug, the expensive aspirin, that worked best. And it worked quite a bit better than the cheap version of aspirin. But here's the thing, out of the groups who got the placebo, the expensive placebo worked a lot better than the cheap placebo, even though they were both sugar pills. But here's the thing, get this, there was hardly any difference in power between the cheap looking aspirin and the expensive looking placebo. Isn't that amazing? I mean, what does that say about the mind-body connection? That somehow just believing in a placebo was able to ramp up the power of something to make it almost as good as the drug itself. And you see that with a number of things. One of my favourites actually, different countries have different marketing budgets, so countries promote drugs differently, and they also have different cultures, different mindsets. If you look at the anti-ulcer drugs, and this was done back in the 80s, scientists were doing a trial of anti-ulcer drugs in Brazil, and they found that when they tested the drug and the placebo, the drug itself was 60% effective in Brazil, Now let's take a similar trial of the same drug in France. And what the scientists found is the drug was a lot better in France, but here's the thing, the placebo in France was 59%. So get this, you have the drug in Brazil is 60% effective, and the placebo in France is 59% effective. So the drug and the placebo, for a very effective drug, was actually much the same. You know, when people hear about these kind of things, the first thing we do is we say, okay, that means that the drug doesn't work. But that isn't always the case. What it actually means is your mind has the ability, has the capacity to generate its own biology that sometimes does the same or a very similar job to the drug itself. And for example, if you give someone a painkiller and take an MRI of the brain, like morphine for example, and take an MRI of the brain, then it fits into little morphine areas called opiate centres in the brain. But if you give someone a placebo and really convince them that it's morphine, and then take an MRI of the brain, it's exactly the same. And what's happened is the brain, or your belief that this is morphine, generates your own natural version of morphine. So morphine's an opiate, so your brain generates endogenous opiates, which is its own version of morphine. Endogenous means endogenous to the body. So I've been fascinated with the mind-body connection for a long time, because what it demonstrates is everything you think about and feel has a physical effect, first in the brain and all throughout the body. And we've kind of known about this for a while. You know, think of what happens when you feel stressed. And I'll draw your attention to, I exaggerated the feel stressed. When you feel stressed, the feeling of stress generates stress hormones in the brain. So the classic stress hormones we've heard about, cortisol and adrenaline, for example. So they get produced in the brain because you feel stressed. Now what that also does is it has a physical impact on the body, so it can you know, in a sense it can restrict blood flow, it can reduce the strength of the immune system because you feel stressed. Now what if instead of feeling stressed you were to feel something entirely differently? Let's say you were to feel a sense of warmth and connection, maybe because you did something kind for someone or because someone showed you compassion or affection. There's something called the Mother Teresa effect, and this will demonstrate the opposite effect of stress. It's called the Mother Teresa effect. Scientists got a group of volunteers to watch a 1-hour video of Mother Teresa walking through the streets of Calcutta, carrying out acts of kindness and compassion. And they had their immune system tested, sampled at the start and at the end. The way they did it is a little saliva swab that measures something called salivary immunoglobulin A. It's the first part of your immune system that springs into action if you eat something contaminated. Like when I was a kid, if you dropped a piece of food on the floor, you just wipe it and you pick it up, wipe it on your trouser leg and you say, God kissed it, the devil missed it. That was the thing, then you ate it. But if it's got a contaminant on it, then the first part of your immune system that springs into action is SIGA, salivary immunoglobulin A. It's this little thing in your saliva. So they measured the immune function through this SIGA. And what they found after watching the 1-hour video of Mother Teresa is the strength of the immune system massively ramped up. Amazingly. Just because of how they felt. How moved they felt and warm and connected they felt watching Mother Teresa doing these acts of kindness and compassion. Their immune system was elevated. And get this, it stayed elevated for several hours afterwards. And the reason for that is because they kept talking about the film and remembering what they saw. I mean, for example, you go and see a film in the cinema. You don't come out of the cinema and go, oh, that was a really good film, and then you forget about it. You talk to your friends about it. Oh, remember that scene? Remember what happened here? Oh, what about that? Wasn't that fantastic? And you go through the film in your head and you feel the feelings of the film, the excitement, whatever, or the love, whatever scene, whatever kind of film you were watching. Similarly with the Mother Teresa effect. As the time went on afterwards and the volunteers would remind themselves, oh, remember that bit in the film where Mother Teresa sat beside that person, that homeless person, and she didn't say a word. She just looked in his eyes and then she rested his head on her shoulder and gave him a little cuddle and didn't say a word. Wasn't that absolutely beautiful? And as they remind themselves of that and their feelings of connection and warmth increase, so the immune system increases with it. So that's kind of affectionately known as the Mother Teresa effect. But what I really wanted to tell you about is something else very significant happened when you feel that sense of warmth, connection, kindness, compassion, love, affection. Anything, I guess you say, is heart-centered. So remember I said when you feel stressed, it's the feelings of stress that generate the stress hormones in the brain and the physical effects of stress in the heart, the arteries, the immune system, etc. But when you be kind or show compassion or feel warmth and affection, anything that's heart-centered, instead of producing stress hormones, you produce what I call the kindness hormone, which is oxytocin. And amazingly, that gets produced in the brain, but it also produces and filters down throughout the body. And amazingly, what it does is it begins to interact with the lining of your arteries. And it literally softens the walls of the arteries. Isn't that amazing? Almost as you're becoming softer in how you think and feel about people, for example, or situations and things, it's almost like the body mirrors you and you soften on the inside. And you can do this at any time during the day. Anytime you can stop what you're doing, you're feeling stressed, take a breath, close your eyes, and think of someone you love. Think of your dog or your cat. You know, my dog Oscar passed away a few years ago, and I used to, when I wasn't in his company, I would close my eyes and think of how we played the night before and rolled around playing with a stick or a ball. And every time I thought about it, I was feeling the feelings. You could think the same about your children or your loved ones, your other loved ones, your siblings, parents, your friends. Even the last time someone showed you kindness, or you were kind, or you witnessed an act of kindness. And every time, because of how you feel, you squirt that little hormone into your brain and into your arteries, and it softens the walls of your arteries. Now this is where the magic happens, because when that happens, your arteries begin to expand, begin to dilate. And as that happens, your blood pressure comes down, because your heart doesn't have to work as hard to get the blood through. So as your heart eases off the pressure because your arterial walls are dilating, your blood pressure drops. So oxytocin, this kindness hormone, is known as a cardioprotective hormone. And what cardioprotective means is it literally protects your heart. That's what cardioprotective means. It protects your heart. And bear in mind, you're producing that because of how you feel. Isn't that amazing? That's the mind-body connection in action. Instead of feeling stressed about stuff, feeling annoyed and frustrated, angry at things, how about several times a day we stop for a moment and think of someone we love, or we do something kind for someone? Show someone an empathy or a little act of compassion. And because of that feeling of warmth and connection, you literally change the biology in your brain and the biology inside your body, your immune system and the walls of your arteries. And it gets even better. There's so many different ways that the mind affects the body. Another thing that really fascinates me is that your brain cannot tell the difference between whether you're doing something or whether you're imagining it. I used to be an athletics coach while I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I was manager and coach of one of the junior men's team of one of the largest clubs in the UK. And when you're in that environment, you start to find out what elite athletes are doing. And amazingly, what a lot of athletes do is they visualise themselves performing at their best. You know, doing their run or their throw or their... For me, I was a long jump, triple jump coach, so I had athletes visualising, imagining, running fast and then doing their jump. And there's so much research in that kind of thing. One of my favourites, actually, in fact, the actual sports visualisation, scientists compare people like doing a golf approach shot, visualising it versus those practising it versus those not doing any practice or visualisation. And what they find is visualising it vastly improves the approach shot of golf. They've done the same thing with tennis, with the tennis serve, the same thing with people throwing basketballs. And it's based on some research that shows that when you imagine, say, lifting a weight or moving a muscle, your brain thinks you're actually doing it. There was a great piece of research at the Lerner Institute for Mechanical Engineering. A number of years ago, they got a group of volunteers to do that with a little finger. And they did that for 15 minutes a day, Monday to Friday for 3 months. And at the beginning and at the end of the study, they had their strength tested. So they put their finger in a wee machine and lifted a wee set of weights to see how strong they were. Amazingly, well, maybe unsurprisingly actually, the average improvement in strength across all of the volunteers was 53%. And that's fair enough because you are actually exercising the muscle. But another group of people, instead of physically doing that with their fingers, they did it in their heads. So they imagined doing that. They didn't, no movement, hand flat, But the instructions are, imagine the feeling, the sensations of physically moving your finger, like that. 15 minutes a day, Monday to Friday for 3 months. Now, amazingly, they'd grown in strength by 35%, and they hadn't even lifted a finger. Crap joke, out of the way. But isn't that amazing though? 35% improvement in strength and you've not lifted a finger. Someone sceptical once said to me, but it wasn't 53% like the people who actually did the exercise. But here's the point, it also wasn't zero. Here you had a 35% improvement in strength by not doing that, but imagining doing that. And it's because when you imagine something, and you look at brain scans, if you compare brain scans of people physically moving versus brain scans of people imagining the same movement, the brain scans are identical. In other words, the brain is literally changing in its fine structure. It's called neuroplasticity, simply through imagining. It's exactly the same thing that happens when you meditate. You practice mindfulness, for example. The most simple form of mindfulness is you become mindful of the fact that you're breathing. You just notice your breathing, or whatever else you're doing, but the simplest form is to become mindful of the fact that you're breathing. And what that does is it activates the front part of the brain, and the brain begins to change in its fine structure, also called neuroplasticity. And that's because your mind is on the fact that you're breathing. Again, it's a mind-body phenomenon. But it's amazing because this has not escaped clinical attention. There's a raft of studies now showing people who've had a stroke that when they scientists split them into two groups. One group get a 6-week course in physiotherapy. A second group get the same physiotherapy sessions, but in addition they do extra not visualisation like that, but extra visualisation work where they have to imagine maybe moving the impaired limb. So if they have impairment on the right side, then they would imagine movements of the right side. Right, for example, like stretching, turning the pages of a book, eating an apple, something that they would normally be actively doing. And amazingly what you find is those who do the visualization as well as the physiotherapy recover much faster and much more movement within the 6 weeks than those who just do physiotherapy. And again, it's because the brain can't distinguish between whether you're doing something or whether you're imagining doing the thing. So, what was it? I've got about 5 minutes left when I've got to sign off, but I wanted to give you a couple of real practical examples of this. I'll be talking, obviously, if those of you who are interested in coming to the talk, it's next Tuesday, the 16th in London. I'll be expanding on this a lot more, but I just want to give you something real that you can take away and run with today. One of the real applications of the mind-body connection is that a number of people who've successfully used it, they use a simple little technique. Given the fact that in some ways the brain can't distinguish real from imaginary, then what they do is they imagine, in their mind, they imagine a state of illness inside the body changing into a state of wellness. And they just do it over and over again. I mean, not instead of medical advice, but in addition to whatever you're doing. And for example, the most frequently used visualization used by people who are going through cancer treatment, let's say it's chemotherapy, is they imagine, as well as the treatment, they imagine the chemo drugs as little piranha fish going, nibbling at the tumours. And in their mind's eye, the tumour is shrinking smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears. People getting radiotherapy, imagine the radiation as bolts of lightning going and burning chunks out of the tumour, just like in the old game Space Invaders, the aliens would shoot bullets down and hit your base. So they picture that visualisation where the cancer is like a little base that's been attacked by or being destroyed by bullets of radiation. Other people physically just imagine a tumour shrinking, melting like the way a block of ice would melt if you left it out on the table or ran it under a hot tap. People with heart conditions imagine going through and cleaning their arteries, like spring cleaning them and taking all the rubbish out. People with arthritis imagine, smoothing their joint and massaging oil into the joints. People with allergies imagine talking to the immune system and telling the immune system that people with hay fever, for example, you don't have to be scared of pollen, you don't have to dive on it and beat it up. Let it go, pollen's okay, you and I, pollen, totally fine, chill out kind of thing. And again, what they're doing is they're imagining this state of the immune system attacking the pollen to the immune system laying off the pollen. So illness to wellness, it's the visualization each time. Even for non-physical conditions, people with depression, imagine one of the depression visualizations used by people is they imagine climbing out of a hole. Imagine conjuring up a ladder and literally climbing out of the hole. I know someone else who said he felt broken, and so he pictured himself as a broken mirror, and he thought, well, I need to turn illness into wellness, this strategy. So what if I can take a broken mirror and make it whole again, and that would symbolise my brokenness becoming whole. So what he did is he imagined a mirror that had broken on the ground and shattered. So in his mind's eye, took a brush and pan, and he swept up the shards of mirror, put them in a cauldron, and he lit a fire under the cauldron, and he melted the shards of mirror, so it was like liquid mirror, mercury kind of thing. And then he poured it out into a new mould, and he blew on it, and he solidified it, and he'd literally made a new mirror. He'd taken brokenness and turned it into wholeness, and that for him symbolised illness becoming wellness. So brokenness is how he felt, and now wholeness was symbolised by the whole mirror. So you don't have to you're not limited to just physical conditions using the strategy of illness changing into wellness. You can apply it to literally anything, as long as you can find a little story to tell yourself, a little transition from illness to wellness. So anyway, that's probably all I have time for, all that I'm allowed. I think I've been asked to limit this to around about 20 minutes, but I'm just trying to squeeze in some extra stuff that you can use. So if you're interested in the talk series I'm doing a talk with Psychologies magazine and Funzing, London Talks at Night. That's on Tuesday the 16th. I'm also doing a series of talks with Funzing over the next couple of months. And also you'll notice that this is part of the Psychologies Life Leap club. It's an online coaching club where you can get coaching tips, inspiration from coaches, experts and psychologists, and that goes live on the 23rd of January. So if you're interested in that, just pop onto the Psychologies website, psychologies.co.uk, and you can read all about the Life Leap Club there. So anyway, I hope this was useful for you today. It's been great just hanging out, having a wee chat about one of my favourite subjects. So I want to leave you with one last tip, and that's to be kind. And not be kind because it benefits your health and your arteries, that goes without saying. Being kind literally softens your arteries and improves your heart. But be kind because it's the right thing to do, and you make a difference in people's lives every day. So thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and if I don't see you again, enjoy the rest of your life. Bye for now.